What's going on, growers? It's James Prigioni coming to you live from Jersey. Just because it's July doesn't mean that me and Tuck are finished planting. So today we're going to share with you 7 crops you can still plant in July. Let's go! Before I get into the 7 crops that you can still plant in July, I first want to mention that I'm in zone 7A. So a lot of these crops are going to pertain to that particular growing zone. Let's get into the first crop you can still plant in July, and this one is cucumbers. So even though cucumbers are in their peak production right now, with just cucumbers everywhere, as you notice here and over here too. So even though they're in peak production, doesn't mean that they're almost finished. These cucumbers have still a lot of time. So our cucumbers will produce up to the first day of frost. In New Jersey, that first day of frost doesn't come till around October 15th. So that still gives us about 100 days to grow cucumbers. And having 100 days left for cucumbers is fantastic because a lot of your typical cucumber varieties only take about 60 days from seed to harvest. Something like the Socrates cucumber that I just showed you, which is one of my all-time favorite varieties to grow, only takes about 54 days. So we still have plenty of time to get a lot of fruit from these plants. When it comes to planting, you can either directly sow your seeds into the ground and then make sure you put a nice mulch over it, or you can start seeds in cells like I do right here. This is the easiest and best way in my opinion. Once the plants are ready, I can put them into their new home. The second crop that we can still plant in July are green beans. And some of the bush beans are my favorite ones to put in the ground at this time of the year, especially the dragon tongue bean that only takes about 60 days from seed to harvest, so there's still plenty of time. When it comes to the bush beans, I plant them about 9 per square foot. I make sure when I plant them that I water them in really well, but I also put a pretty thick mulch down of something like these diced leaves. This way the ground stays moist so that we can get good germination, because at this time of the year it starts to get hot, so having good germination on things can be a little tricky. That's why we need to put that mulch down. And the beans are strong enough to push right up through that mulch, which is just fantastic. Tuck's waiting for some green beans. We don't have any ready yet, but they'll be ready quite soon. If you want to plant some pole beans, just make sure you keep an eye on the variety and how long they will take. For instance, something like our purple, the yard-long bean, that's going to take like 90 days to harvest. So if you want to get a good harvest from that one, make sure you have enough days left until your frost. Like I mentioned, we only have about 105 days left here until our first frost. Before I get into the next crop that we can sow in July, I first want to mention to grab some summer merch at jamesprigioni.com. If you want to support the channel, if you like the summer merch, grab it while it's still here. It's a limited time thing. Let's get into the next crop. So the third crop that we can still plant in July are summer squash. Stuff like our zucchinis and our patty pan squash. So just like cucumbers, zucchinis will produce up to the first day of frost. Some awesome varieties like the Costado Romanesco that I just showed you, they only take about 60 days from seed to harvest. So if you're like me and you have zucchinis that are growing fantastic, don't just be happy with that. Make sure you get a whole nother round of plants going, because something could happen to these plants, maybe a pest issue or something, and if something like that ever does happen, we want to make sure we have another round to replace it. Or maybe you didn't even plant your squash yet. You can get it into the ground now. You still have plenty of time to get fantastic harvests. When it comes to planting your summer squash, you can either directly sow it into the ground in the spot you're going to grow it, or you can plant it in a tray like this. This is how I particularly like to do it, because I may be putting the squash in a spot that I have plants in already. When I do it like this, what I like to do is wait for the plants to have at least 2 true leaves, and then I could take these transplants and move them into a location where I don't have anything planted, or I can replace another squash. One thing that's important to mention at this time of the year is it starts to get really hot in like July and August, so actually starting a lot of your seeds can be tough. That's another reason that I like using these seed trays. What I do is I kind of create my own little like germination incubation chamber. What I do is I use this hinged hoop house like I have here that I took off one of my beds. Then if I want to pop some seeds up and it's super hot out, I could just take my 40% shade cloth and lay that over the top. This will create some natural shade for the plants. This way they're not getting too stressed out on super hot days. So I either like to use this for getting some of my plants out of the ground, or I like to use this when some of the plants are young. If it's super hot, we just don't want to stress those young seedlings out. If you don't have a shade cloth like this, you can also do what I'm doing at this other end. Just put your trays in a location that gets some filtered sunlight, naturally, like through a tree or something. Because again, one of your issues with planting things in July and August is going to be the germination of the seeds, because it does get hot at this time of the year. Before we move to the next veggie, it looks like Tuck's starting to sniff it out. He knows where he's going. I want to give him some water real quick though, because I know he's thirsty. So we'll give this guy some fresh water. He's always out here, he's always dedicated, so loyal. spam the hearts down in the comments if you love seeing Tuck in the videos, and then also hit that subscribe button if you love seeing the boss in the videos. Such a good guy. So the fourth crop that we can still plant in July are carrots. Let's actually see if Tuck wants one. Hey Tuck, we got any carrots back here for you, boy? So the thing with carrots is they're a bit tricky to grow at this time of the year because of the germination. So carrots need 2 weeks to germinate, which is about 1 to 2 weeks, I'd say, actually, to germinate. The tricky thing is that it's super hot at this time of the year, so the soil doesn't stay that moist. So what you would think is, let's get some thick mulch down. The thing is, carrots don't really push up through mulches, so they don't really like to be covered at all. So how do we do this? How do we keep the soil moist without actually covering it too much? So that's where I like to use one of my famous tricks that I got from Bill Mollison. Let me grab it right here. I call this the carrot board trick. So essentially what we do is we plant our carrots in our 1 square foot section. We just drizzle them on the top, 16 carrots per square foot. We drizzle it right on top, barely cover it at all with any soil. Then we water it in, and then we take our square foot board and we cover the carrots. We cover the carrots so that the ground stays nice and equally moist. This way we get good germination. And after about a week, we need to make sure that we're going out there every day and checking on our carrots to see if they are germinating or popping up. Because if they pop up when the board is still covering them, that's gonna be bad news. So you wanna make sure you go out there regularly, see if your carrots have popped. Once you see them starting to pop, take that board off. After your carrots have grown to a decently large size, then you could get the mulch around them. But it's super important to not put a deep mulch on those carrot seeds because they will not push up through a mulch like something like beans would, or cucumbers even would. So your carrots, when you're seeding them this time of the year, always good to have the carrot board technique on your side. A great thing about carrots, as I grab one right here, nice beautiful orange carrot, I'll have to snack on this one. So a great thing about carrots is, unlike something like your cucumbers, these are gonna be ready far after your first frost. When it comes to carrots, they actually get sweeter when the ground gets colder. So even if we have a hard frost, these carrots are gonna be in the ground getting even better tasting basically. So if you wanna make sure you're harvesting delicious carrots in the fall and into the winter, you gotta make sure you start planting them soon. Let me taste this baby. Oh. Incredible carrot flavor. Not super sweet, but again, if we eat these carrots late into the fall and into the winter when the ground starts cooling, these things will be even sweeter. The flavor, amazing though. Just so much like of that natural carrot flavor. And of course, they're Tuck approved, so you know they're the good stuff. Yeah, me and Tuck might be eating these carrots with some dirt on them, but when it comes down to it, dirt really never hurt. We're growing all organic, so hey, I think it's all good. I'll tell you what, there's nothing like sharing some fresh carrots right with the boss, when you're your best friend here. Beautiful day, sharing carrots and eating them. We all want you to have this opportunity, so make sure you get some of this stuff into the ground. The fifth crop that you can still plant in July is lettuce. Similar to carrots, lettuce can be a little tricky to germinate at this time of the year because it's so hot and the lettuce seeds do not really like to be buried deep. They actually need like a flash of light in order to germinate your lettuce seeds, which is, you know, different than a lot of your other seeds. And you can't bury them super deep like you would your beans or something, which gives it better germination because it's, you know, always wetter down there. So it's a little tough to get your lettuce seeds up. Because of this, what I like to do is I like to start my lettuce seeds in trays, like I do my cucumbers and stuff. I start them in trays, either underneath my shade cloth or in some filtered sunlight. After they have about 4 true leaves, I'll take my lettuces and transplant them into the garden. The only difference between when I plant them in spring and fall lettuce or even summer lettuce is I like to make sure I choose a location that gets a decent amount of shade. So you can either plant it in a spot that gets some filter shade from other plants, or you could just plant it in a location that gets partial shade from like a big tree or something. So we don't want to be planting our lettuce in a spot like I have right here in summer because it's just going to get too much light. Too much sun, it's going to get too hot, and then it's going to force this lettuce to bolt. Another thing we really need to think about when planting lettuce in the summer, has to do with the variety. So we want to choose a variety that's super bolt resistant. One of the best varieties is slow bolt. So this is just going to be less likely to bolt from the heat. So again, when growing lettuce in the summer heat, make sure you pick the right variety. The sixth crop you can still plant in July is Swiss chard. this nutrient-dense plant is fantastic because it does relatively well in the heat and also does well in the cold. Bill Mollison says that Americans really overlook this plant and its value, and I tend to agree with him because, again, it just grows for such a long time and it does produce excellent food. Produces a long time for something like your greens too, and it's heat tolerant for something like some of your green plants and stuff, which usually don't do as well in the heat. But if you don't have Swiss chard planted, you need to make sure you get some in the ground now because it will just extend your growing season and it will be another fresh green that you can grab out of the ground, and still you can plant it at this time of the year and expect massive harvests. Another great thing about Swiss chard, as I harvest some of these leaves, is that these plants will grow well in partial shade. So if you have a location that's relatively shady right now and it's super hot out, this is a great plant to put in that shady spot where something like your tomatoes or something won't grow well. So again, don't waste a spot just because it's shady. Make sure you're growing some Swiss chard late into the year. The seventh crop that you can still plant in July, I like to encompass by saying all the brassicas, including kale, cabbage, cauliflower, and broccoli. It may still seem early to start preparing things like our fall crops, but for some of our varieties that take like maybe 100 days, like some of our cabbages, we need to start thinking about getting those seeds into the ground so that we have enough time for those plants to mature. Something like our kales or something, we can start planting those whenever we want because we don't have to wait for those necessarily to mature to start getting a harvest from them. We could just harvest them when they're leaves, just like this. Like I mentioned earlier, we only have a little more than 100 days till our first frost, but that doesn't mean brassicas like our kale and our cabbages only have 100 days to grow. They have much longer than that because a lot of these varieties will grow way past their frost because they're really cold hardy. Something like our red Russian kale, that thing will grow like through the whole year around here. But some of our things like the cabbages that take about like 100 days to mature, they're not going to grow very fast once it starts to get cold out. So we need to make sure we get those in the ground soon so they have plenty of time to reach that maturity. If you don't have a lot of time till your first frost comes, you could grow some of the other short-dated cabbage varieties, something like the early Jersey Wigfield cabbage. It only takes about like 65 days to reach maturity. Sowing seeds, especially for brassicas at this time of the year, can be a little difficult, especially if you want to sow them directly. What I think the best thing to do is to start them in trays. This way you could cover the seed tray with like an insect netting if it gets really hot, and then once your plants have reached about 2 or 3 true leaves, you could start transplanting them into the location that you want to put them in. I suggest choosing a location that gets a decent amount of shade if you're going to grow something like your kale. But if you're going to grow something like your cabbages, you want to make sure those get a good amount of light because they need more light than something like your kale would. It's also important to think about when putting out your cabbages and your kales that you want to transplant on either a cloudy day or a day where you're going to get like a couple days of rain, because with extreme heat, these brassicas are not heat loving. So you want to make sure you can avoid that extreme heat when you're actually transplanting them into the ground. To me, July often feels like one of those months where I just want to kick back and relish in all the beautiful plantings that I put in the spring and summer. But that's not the right mindset. When we're harvesting, like at this time of the year, we shouldn't just be thinking about, oh man, it's so great to get that harvest. We should be thinking about, yeah, I'm getting this harvest, but what can I do in order to ensure myself another harvest later in the season? So if we want to make sure we're continually getting harvests, then we need to be continually planting seeds. So that's why I think it's important that you spend some of your July getting the 7 crops that I just shared with you into the ground. That's today's video, growers. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. When it comes to gardening, I think like most of our favorite part of the whole entire thing is always the harvesting. But it's important to note that there is no harvesting without the sowing. So it's so important to spend a lot of time on the actual planting. Like I mentioned, if we want to be continually harvesting things, then it only makes sense that we're continually sowing things. And if you take a look at the end of the year and your harvests just aren't where they're at, I heard a good saying for that. You got to make sure you get some sowing going. So this is why I love making a video, especially this time of year. People might be thinking, oh, it's July. Let's kick back, let's get all of our summer and spring harvests, and then hopefully some of this stuff lasts till fall. Me and Tuck aren't into that. Me and the boss would rather spend some time planting more rounds of things. Like if our zucchini slows down, we've got new zucchini plants to put in. If something happens to one of our cucumber plants, we've got other cucumbers to replace it. Some of our brassicas, maybe they're starting to slow down when the heat comes. We'll get a whole nother round of brassicas planted that will do fantastic in the fall. So we need to make sure we're always planting things in the ground. Me and Tuck, fortunately, we're always planting things because we love growing just as much as harvesting. So I think that kind of makes it easier for us. Before me and the boss let you go, we want to mention a few things. First, we want to mention to grab some of the summer merch down at jamesprigioni.com if you want to support the channel. We got shirts, there's kids clothes there, there's women's clothes, grab a kneeler, a water bottle, all different kinds of stuff that me and Tuck just, we love them, and we have so much fun making the merch and coming up with the designs and stuff. We also want to thank one of our new channel members. Thanks for being a part of Team Grow, Monique Muti. Thanks for your contribution. Thanks for having your hand in everything that we're growing back here. Thanks for, allowing me and Tuck to spend the time with all of you in the garden, building a food forest and just connecting with nature. There's nothing more we love more. There's nothing better. Sometimes I stumble over my words when it comes to explaining the garden, especially when I'm looking at it, because oftentimes it takes my breath away to see all the incredible amount of growth here. I look over here and I remember what it looked like, 10 years ago when it was all grass. Now I look around at me and it's like you're bumping into food at every single turn. So I want everyone to get as many things planted as they can. Use the whole growing season that you have and grow as much food as you can in the spot that you have. Not only will it feed you, but it's so rewarding in so many different ways. Me and Tuck will be back to you again real soon. We out.